Okay, let's get started on card 1. So the first card in the 3 blended seasons cards that I'm going to show you today is the one with the autumn leaves. So when I used the colours here, I realised I used a blend of the Watercolour Pencil Assortment 1 and 2. So I've changed my colours up a little bit for this sample so that they're all within this pack of watercolour pencils, which is available exclusively this month. So this has added in some awesome extra colours that we were really keen on. Especially love Granny Apple Green, the Gorgeous Grape, Balmy Blue. Lots of really great colours added in there that really extend the colour range with the watercolour pencils. So I definitely recommend getting those during August while they're available. They have said they'll be available in a future catalogue, but we're not sure which one that is. They might be available, should I say. So this is a set of 10 and includes Night of Navy there as well. So Flirty Flamingo, Cherry Cobbler, great for Christmas. So Cherry Cobbler, Granny Apple Green, Garden Green, great Christmas colours as well. So definitely recommend you get hold of those. And with the watercolour pencils, we're actually going to be using them on Stampin' Up's watercolour paper. Now the watercolour paper comes in a sheet 6 by 9 inches, but I actually cut it into quarters, so you get a bit 3 inches by 4.5 inches, and that's generally plenty to do your watercolouring on. So you get actually quite good value from that. Because we're adding water, it's really important that we use stays on solvent ink, because if we used a water-based ink, what would happen when we add water is it would just run. So I'll just that. Now make sure that your lid's off. What you need to be making sure of when you're stamping onto watercolour paper is that your ink pad is nice and juicy, and you ink your stamp up well and you're applying even pressure, because the watercolour paper is very absorbent and it's also uneven in texture. So you sometimes don't get that crisp image unless you take care of those things. So you notice when I applied the even pressure, I wasn't actually rocking, I was just applying pressure on top. That's very important as well, otherwise you'll get those little bits around the edges, which we don't want. Okay, so we'll just pop those away. I'm going to be adding water with a blender pen. You can actually use blender pen or an aqua painter, but because it's quite a small area, and I'd like quite good control, I actually like to use the blender pen in this situation. So I choose one or the other depending on the circumstances. I use them both a lot. So the blender pens come in a pack of 3, and you actually get a tip on each end. So you actually get 6 different tips. Now you will find that the tips they tip stain, but that won't affect how they stamp. What you need to be sure of is before you use them, or actually after you use them really, is making sure that the tips are running clear, so that when you go to your next project you're not actually adding in extra colour that you don't want to be adding. So let's have a little look. So I'm going to start with the brightest green here, and really what I'm hoping to do in these videos is just show you the colouring technique. The actual instructions to make the card and the materials that I used I'll provide in a PDF, but I want to actually show you how I'm laying down the colour and blending that. So we're actually starting in the centre here with the brightest green, and the reason that I'm doing that is if you actually look at an autumn leaf, you'll see that the way that they colour, the green is generally closest to the centre, because that's still got the nutrients and the oxygen and the water and things coming through, and they're starting to die on the edges. So that's when you start to get the more mottled colours. So I lay down my first colour there, and then I'm just going to start with 2 colours. I'm going to put some of the Cajun Craze, which is a real terracotta colour, great for colouring terracotta pots, this one. So if you like colouring flower images, this set's a good one for you. So basically what you're doing here is you're laying down tiny bits of pigment, and then when you're adding the water, they're going to blend together. So because we're not adding as much water as you would be with an aqua painter, you'll still get a little bit of a grainy effect on this size with the blender pens, because you still get tiny amounts of pigment left in there. And I actually think that's really good with autumn leaves, because it actually adds appearance of texture and just adds that interest and imperfection, I guess, to the effect. So as you can see, as I add the water with the blender pen, the colours are blending together. So it's just a matter of going over those colours and blending where you've joined them together. Okay, so now what I want to do is make sure that I've got rid of all of that colour, and I think I'll add a little bit of the darker green in. And I think I'll add that bit, not really sure where I'm going to add that, just as it looks, a bit around the centre bit here. I think I just didn't get as much green in it that I wanted with the Granny Apple green. So pop that in like that, and then we'll add a little bit more blender pen. So you can add more colour, wait until that dries. It's actually better to wait until it dries, but the process of the video here, I'll just keep on adding it. And then the last colour I'm going to add is actually the Gorgeous Grape. Now you might think, actually we'll pop a little bit of garden green on here. You might think that's a strange colour to be adding, but I do see purple in autumn leaves sometimes. So I'm mostly adding this one just really where those bigger veins are. And again, just coming back in with my blender pen and just softening out those bits that I've added. So that's the effect that I'm getting. So that's using the watercolour pencils, and so that's just, you can add all sorts of different colours. I've seen people adding pinks and oranges and all sorts into there, and you can add, you know, extra highlights along the edges. I might come back in later and say it needs a little bit more green, so I can pop that down there and add my blender pens in. So yeah, that's how I get the effect with adding watercolour pencils, the blender pen, and using watercolour paper.